All right, it's about 12:04. More people are probably going to trickle in, but I think we're going to start now just to kind of go for time. So, first of all, I want to thank everybody for coming here for this talk. My name is Juwan from AI Futures. I work as the event coordinator. Today, we're going to have Matt Nelson, the CTO of BESPIN, coming in for a talk on the introduction to Air Force Software Factory and giving some information on BESPIN, which happens to be one of those software factories. Before I pass it over to him to kind of talk about him and talk and go into his presentation, I do want to talk a little bit about AI Futures. So, to start off, AI Futures is a program that is funded by the Department of Defense that helps educate students like yourself on the opportunities that are available in the Department of Defense on the civilian side, help you out in terms of your LinkedIn, in terms of your resume, in terms of just giving you that advice and giving you that information on what's available for you in the DoD and what might match up with your career path. Outside of that, one of the best ways we go about interacting with you guys is our events. So we have multiple different types of events that we do. One of them you're in right now, which is our technical talks, where we have a subject matter expert. Sorry. Like we have today with Matt Nelson, who comes in and kind of gives a talk, whether it be their career journey or more technical topic, whether it's mobile app development, software development, AI/ML, whatever it might be. Um, from there, we have our hackathons. We sponsor a ton of hackathons, maybe at a school near you, where we'll come in, set up a booth, talk to you, kind of get an understanding face to face on what you want to do or what your career goals are and how we can align with that. And then also, we do live events, whether it be class talks. We have our own AIGVC, which we take to various schools. That is a robotics challenge where students go through various challenges to be able to get one of our robots up and running, moving around maze, and be able possibly to control that through algorithms, kind of similar to what you see in some of the machine learning algorithms that are currently out there on the market. So there's multiple different things that we do to be able to interact with you guys. And this is one of those ways. So from here, I'm going to pass it off actually to Matt to kind of explain his side of things, what he does, and more information on him.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Juan. Really excited to be here. So, yeah, my name is Matt Nelson. I'll just kind of give like a quick little background of, what my career journey was, and then we'll get into, I think the most exciting part of the conversation is what is BESPIN. But, I've been involved in the DoD for the last 18 years. I started as uh, an Air Force acquisition officer back in 2006. I really got exposed to really cool technologies either through like working on satellite programs. I was on the Air Force One program where actually we built we used VR to build like what is the interior layout options of the next generation Air Force One. Did some really cool things around targeting software and command and control. And that's what got me into this whole world of software factories. And you might be thinking, hey, Matt, what is a software factory? So um, back in my original time inside the DoD, a lot of the software that was delivered to us was essentially just like a black box to us. We didn't really know what were the functional ins and outs of the software. It was delivered, to us, through the mail on a disk, and we would just, if we had any issues, we would just call the vendor and say, hey, we are having some bugs within this software, please fix it. But we quickly realized that, hey, software is, a way to have an advantage on the battlefield, because those who can fix software and deliver software and create new features faster than the enemy are going to be able to have that asymmetrical advantage on the battlefield. We're really starting to see this now with, all the small UAS drones that are out there, all the different cloud technologies that are out there. You don't go to conflict with just those commercial drones or anything off the shelf. You're jailbreaking those and putting your own software packages on them and doing that. And the only way you can do that is if you bring organic software talent into the Air Force, like kind of taking a play from like the 1960s and 70s, where the best technologists in the world, where DoD civilians and military operators. So, that's what we did. When I was a major back in 2016, we had this crazy idea. There was a $500 million program called the Air Operations Center, and it was going through this thing called a non-McCurdy breach, which essentially says, hey, you are way over budget and you are way behind schedule. You got to brief Congress. And our senior leader at the time briefed Congress, and they said, the late great John McCain actually said, I'm tired of throwing good money after a bad program here. We're going to cancel it. And so what we did was we raised our hand and said, hey, we think we have a better way of doing this. Let's create a software factory of organic talent. When I say organic, like, not vendors or anything like that, people that work for the Department of Defense. And let's build software that meets the needs of the warfighters through our own talent. And we're going to do that in a methodical way, with DevSecOps, and really making sure that our dev environment has parity with our production environment. We bring in all the security controls, because if you don't know this, like military software has to basically adhere to about 1,200 different cybersecurity controls that they have to document and implement. But what if you automated the implementation of, let's say, 90% of those controls through modern pipelines and infrastructure as code and all of those things? And essentially, this is a long preamble to say that's how the software factory concept kind of birthed. And back in 2016, I was on the ground floor of this project called Kessel Run, and we did that. And then, in 2020, a couple of the guys that started Kessel Run said, hey, why don't we get out and try to scale this horizontally across, the Department of Defense, this new way of building software organically. We're going to come in and train people and teach them and coach them how to do that. We started a company called Rise 8. So I got out of government service for 3 years, was the COO of this startup called Rise 8, took it from, 4 people that were just trying to like get this dream alive to now there's over 100 folks inside of that company. I, still felt the calling though for, hey, let's keep, really being closer to the mission. So I, took the job to come back as a government civilian last year to be the CTO of the software factory called BESPIN. So I'll tell you about BESPIN here in a bit, but that's a little bit about me. And super excited to kind of have this conversation with you guys today, or just a presentation. So next slide. So, since 2016, when Kessel Run was that first software factory that got stood up, what really happened was there was this really big groundswell of, hey, this is a better way of doing it. There was a lot of huge wins. We were delivering software inside of a continuous authority to operate pipeline, because that cybersecurity process that I talked about, on typical average, when you check in your code into the main branch, in the past, you would pass that code off to a quality assurance and cybersecurity team, and they would spend 406 days on average getting it accredited. And inevitably, they're going to find bugs inside your code base or vulnerabilities inside your code base, and they would pass it back to the developers, and this whole death spiral took place. And that's what happened with that AOC project. That's why after 5 years, they didn't have any working code, because every time they checked it in for quality assurance and cybersecurity testing, something was found, then they have to rebuild it, and then something else was found, because that feedback loop was 406 days. So we automated that, and using these pipelines and using these platforms to really build software in a DevSecOps mature way. All these other organizations started doing that the same, and it's almost become like a really cool coalition of other digital organizations inside the Department of Defense. And you can see all the little cool logos on the slide here. But the one that we're going to really focus on today is BESPIN. So if you go to the next slide. So BESPIN is the software factory for mobile software. We're the only software factory inside the entire DoD that has an enterprise signing certificate with both Apple and Google Play. So what that really enables us to do is we don't have to go into Xcode and have Apple reviewers spend 2 to 3 weeks reviewing our code and then getting it checked in onto the App Store. We can do that all in-house with this pipeline that we've built out. And what that enables us to do is really focus on features now, because all of the back-end policy enforcement folks around, adhering to Apple or Android's configurations, we've already baked that in. And, now our mission is, hey, let's create these mobile operations that enable the US and its allies. And the allies is very specific there because we are working with, the Australians and the Canadians and the Brits and the Singaporeans to dominate warfare. How can we do that with mobile operations? Because right now, the state of DoD when it comes to mobile is, we're a generation behind. About 10% of warfighters have the ability to conduct their mission on a mobile device versus, in your private life, 99 to 100% of us can conduct our private life mission on a mobile device. Why is it such a big inverse when it comes to DoD? And that's the challenge, and that's the thing that BESPIN has taken on, but with this mobile software factory. So if you go to the next slide, kind of just wanted to hit on, some of the things accomplishments that we've been able to successfully deliver with inside BESPIN. So, one of the things that we really pride ourselves on is, implementing commercial best practices into all of the back-end components of our factory. So over here on the far left, like the CATO, that is a continuous authority to operate pipeline. That's that pipeline that I mentioned that does the automated checks of those, 1,000 security controls. Then the mission delivery as a service pipeline, that is the thing that's getting these mobile apps directly into Apple Store, Google Play, and also the mobile device managers. We have a whole design studio, so our apps have the same look and feel. We manage our own cloud infrastructure team, user experience monitor. So we have an application that can actually observe, the user's experience on the application, so we can get feedback on them. Our Access Connect Data Connect piece, with inside the DoD, it's very hard to get connected to authoritarian sources of data. So we have our own team that focuses on that. And then that leads to the things over here from the application side that is really the important mission of BESPIN, right? Like we have built over 27 different applications. Some are, training applications like Digital University. Some are mission support applications like KinderSpot, being able to find childcare for, your children if you're deployed or, on TDY. Or, a lot of these are mission-based applications, either, the aircraft maintainers or the pilots or the logisticians that need to support the fight, all have applications that we built. And if you tally up all the different end users of all our different applications, we're now at 375,000 end users that we support globally across not just the Air Force, but, the entire Department of Defense. And I think now I'm going to just head over to a separate slide presentation that dives deeper into BESPIN. But yeah, feel free to add any questions into the chat. I'll do my best to try to keep the top of those while I'm speaking here.
Yeah, as we transition, like Matt already mentioned, and also in chat, if you have any questions, feel free to post those in chat or in the Q&A. We also have another representative here, specifically from Air Force Lifecycle Management Center, Maxie Locke, who's also going to be available to answer any questions specifically towards the Air Force or their mission. So actually, during this period of time while we're transitioning, Maxie, if you want to give a quick introduction.
Sure. So I am Maxie Locke. I'm actually a recruitment program specialist for the Air Force Lifecycle Management Center. So our mission is to acquire and support war-winning capabilities that supports our national defense. So this means we develop and procure every aircraft, every weapon system, every network, and every piece of equipment in the United States Air Force inventory. So we are currently recruiting for 9 major US locations. We are looking for really analytical, business oriented, resilient leaders, really in finance, logistics, engineering, IT, information protection, intelligence, program management, contracts, and HR. So I can actually put in the chat a link to submit your resume to our resume Dropbox. If you're interested in learning more, you can submit your resume to the resume Dropbox, and a sourcer will reach out to you to schedule a brief phone screen to really just have like an exploratory call to see what you're interested in and see what you're looking to what you're looking for in your next career.
Awesome. Well, that will be available in chat soon. And again, we'll have Q&A near the end of this talk. So if there's any other questions you have for her and for Matt, you'll be able to ask questions at the end.
All right, right on. Let me transition over here to a different slide presentation. All right, so we're talking about BESPIN, so Business Enterprise Systems Product Innovation. You know, we had to come up with an acronym to meet BESPIN, which is a Star Wars reference. It's the planet that Cloud City was on, you know, inside of Empire Strikes Back type of thing. All right, so I want to kind of tell you, I told you a little bit, I know, I love it. I told you a little bit of our history, but I wanted to kind of just dive deeper into it. So back in 2018, you know, 5G was about to become a big thing, and, you know, the Air Force realized, hey, we can't be caught flat-footed inside of this, you know, disruptive technology that is going to be 5G. So they invested $600 million into a study. And, you know, one of the things that, you know, came out of that was like, hey, we're going to need more organic talent around this. And so in 2019, BESPIN was stood up, right? Like, and just like all cool kind of startups inside the DoD, we didn't have any official program dollars or legacy program to transform. But what we did have, and which is a really cool mission of BESPIN, is we had 100 1 Delta 7 computer programmer billets. And those are billets that are airmen, like blue suit airmen, that we work with on a day-to-day basis. So our kind of, you know, airmen to government civilian ratio is probably 8-to-1, but it's a really unique opportunity to partner with, you know, enlisted airmen that are, you know, trained as their career field. 1 Delta 7 is computer programmer, to get after really impactful mission operations together. And that's the best thing about BESPIN is, you know, being close to operations and being able to solve warfighters' problems through technology. And I always like to highlight, like, one of the things that, you know, is a game changer for BESPIN and mobile operations in general is, you know, we had this continuous authority to operate approved. That 406-day cybersecurity process was the biggest bottleneck for any IT software-centric program in the DoD. And, you know, being able to, every time you check in your code and it passes our pipeline, it is certified for operational use, is a game changer inside of current IT landscape in the DoD. And we're, you know, one of 6 organizations across the DoD that has one of those CATO pipelines. A little bit more just on the demographic side, over on the right-hand side, you can kind of see all of the support contractors and vendors that work with us. Like when you add it all up together, even though we have 106 airmen, we have about 350, you know, support contractors across this overall ecosystem. And like I mentioned, we're working with the international partners. You know, this number here is actually 355. It continues to grow as the number of applications continues to, you know, increase our user base. But the cool thing is it's a good microcosm of what a modern IT technology organization kind of looks like, right? We have opportunities for mobile developers, cloud engineers, pipeline engineers, cybersecurity, web developers, all the whole spectrum to be able to get applications into the hands of the warfighter. It can't just be done with engineers. You got to have designers, you got to have product managers, you got to have the whole team behind you to be able to do that. And that's how BESPIN is kind of broken out. So what do we provide? Want to kind of start with the less cool or less, sexy stuff, but is probably the foundation to be able to do rapid software delivery correctly. You got to have good business oriented, culture inside of the organization so we can work with customers, understand their requirements, use user-centered design to do that, and, quickly get customers into our door. And then, I feel like a broken record on the whole CATO thing, but that is a huge piece to being able to get capabilities out the door. Data, this is an AI kind of centric conversation here. The first thing you need to do before you can start into your AI journey is really getting an understanding of where your data lives. How are you going to clean that data? How are you going to then leverage that data to support model development or, fusion of that information to have clean processed information. So you gotta really have a good API strategy. And that's, what we do with inside of our Data Connect portfolio. And then we got to make sure that these applications are actually solving problems and being used. So that's user experience monitoring. We have a whole design studio team as well. And then cloud operations. The best thing about BESPIN is, the whole concept, well, it worked on my machine, but then when I pushed it into production, it broke. Our cloud operations and our platform team really make sure that there's, a consistent environment that we are deving in that is parity to that production environment. So you can do that quality assurance, you can do that testing, and you have faith that, when you deploy it, it's going to work in production as well. All right, so what that really does is creates massive efficiencies, right? So beforehand, DoD software projects would have to take on all of these little things inside of the blue, right? Like from pipelines to, identity access management, the logging and, patching and automation and all of the compute orchestration, all of the things that that are necessary, but don't really allow, they're not features, they're below the value line is what we call them. And it really slows teams down. So what we have done is we have these as enterprise services. So if you come in and you build inside BESPIN, you don't have to worry about these things in the blue. The cloud ops team is going to take on some things. Our pipeline team is going to take on some things. And the Data Connect team is going to take on other things. So what you were really focused on is just at the app layer, really, and your features and your back-end code base and your front-end code base and your local database for your application versus all of this other operational things, which really allow you to go fast. And if you look at it from this cool little GIF here, what we're doing here is we're agnostic to a lot of app types. I know that I've said, we're mobile, but, a lot of our customers need, their workloads also hosted in a web-like experience. So we do web, container, Android. You develop it in our GitLab environment. It goes through this SD elements for that's just a tool that enforces all those 1,000 security controls to be checked and monitored. And then it goes into this build and test stage, and we have all of these different components to help validate software bill of materials and help you really understand, dynamic testing of your application and all of the things that you're going to need to do before you bundle up that application and deploy it into your production environment. So your production environment for us is, either these commercial app stores, MDMs, which is your mobile device manager, or mission device manager now, or, if it's a web-based app, you're deploying into this Air Force, version of a cloud service provider called Cloud One. And that's really the bread and butter of what a software factory does, is it takes this is the factory, floor or, assembly line or whatever you want to call it that we manage inside of BESPIN. Kind of talk on, hey, we've had 27 different applications that are really trying to improve the efficiency of what we're trying to do here. And so one of the applications that I kind of like to highlight here is Pluto. So with inside Pluto, it's an application for aircraft status. Before you had Pluto, the way you're getting aircraft status is writing it down on a clipboard, making a bunch of radio calls, walking sometimes 300 yards to the building that has the computer and typing in all that information from what you remembered on a radio call or from what you did on whatever notes you've written down. And that just takes a lot of time because if you need to get an F-16 in the air, you need to know, like, is the F-16 ready to go? Is the fuel status green? It's got fuel, pilots there, they did the walk around check, there's nothing broken on the jet. You want to get those aircraft up in the air as quick as possible, especially in an emergency situation or anything like that. Pluto reduces the time to do that because you can really say, the crew chief of that flight can give the pilot the thumbs up that they're ready to go in a much faster time now. And the cool thing about this app, it's a mobile app, but the back-end technologies of Pluto establishes a mesh network on the flight line, because a lot of these flight lines that we're working on don't have great internet connectivity, but you still want to be able to share, show, and edit data even when you're offline using a mobile device. So with the power of the supercomputers that are inside of our pocket, we can quickly stand up a mesh network to be able to do that, to be able to get that information into that crew chief's hands in a almost 75% faster type of story. So let's talk a little bit more of how we enable mobile. How do we enable mobile ops inside the DoD? So we're learning a ton that one of the biggest disruption capabilities on the modern battlefield today is the portable smartphone. And that's not just a quote that Matt Nelson from BESPIN said. That is a quote from the Modern Warfare Institute at West Point. And the reason why they stated that is we're starting to see a lot of this happen inside of these modern conflicts. If you look at the Russian-Ukrainian war, the devices that the troops are carrying with them are critical weapons of war. They're actually a sensor. They don't just treat them as a phone. They're using to do drone detection. They're using it to pass intel from one unit to the next, and they're using it actually like that. The mobile application on your smartphone is doing the drone command and control and flying the drones for you, and all of those pieces. And then, like, I see the question, how do we incorporate AI into federal government clients given the strict requirements and lack of solid AI regulations while ensuring safety and security of your processes? So and they can also be tracked by the enemy too. So I'll get to that part in my briefing as well, of like, your devices do emit a signal of where you are at too. So how are we mitigating that? But on the AI piece, I'll quickly hit on like some of the things that we're doing for being able to do modern, getting into that AI world is, on your phone, on your device, there's a bunch of different sensors, right? There's cameras, there's microphones, there are all of those things. One of the things that we're looking at is this tool called EchoLink that uses acoustic models on the device and be able to, like, you hear the little of a drone flying by or anything like that. It can then, kind of record that as, yes, that is a drone. And then it will then, use AI on the back end to say, hey, based off of that acoustic model and the bearing and range of the noise, it is, a drone at 500 feet flying at south by southwest direction, type of thing. So you can have just that additional layer of intelligence on the battlefield. So for more for less, we are doing a lot of processing of those kind of sensor data, at the edge. So then you can push up only that only that relevant information. So not every time, something flies by that isn't, mirrored up with one of those acoustic models, you don't need to push that up and just like really clog the pipes of like the contested 5G network that you're operating over. And we're able to like really start to lean forward on this is because we have a supercomputer in our pocket, right? Like all of the things, like we need to start thinking our phones are no longer just a phone. Like the most powerful M4 chip that Apple builds is actually not in a MacBook. It's in the iPad Pro, because they are starting to realize that AI and processing that information at the edge is going to be the way of the future. So those are the types of things that we are championing inside of BESPIN. It's like, how can we use these really powerful devices in sophisticated ways to get after complex mission requirements? And the reason why we're like super focused and really in love with this problem is mobile is eating the world, right? Like 98% of the US population has access to a mobile device. There's 6 billion devices across the world right now. That's like 80% of the world's population would have access to a mobile device. And then when 6G or future G or whatever you want to call it rolls out, they're anticipating bandwidth speeds of up to 1 terabit per second, and drastically increasing the number of devices, and really going to create like a whole new game-changing impacts when it comes to advanced AI at the edge and immersive AR at the edge and IoTs and sensors, and like that world is coming. That's only a generation away, and we don't want to be caught flat-footed because we haven't incorporated mobile operations into our tactics and techniques on the battlefield and things like that. Really just want to say like, hey, this is just the natural evolution of tech ecosystems. Like, there's 1.5 billion PCs out there in the world. This chart was built in 2020, and now we're at 6 billion mobile devices out in the world, because like now you have something inside of everyone's pocket that they can become a sensor. And how do you then fuse that data that sensor has to be able to make informed decisions? Because there's that 4x, 5x now more mobile devices out there than PCs. They're used everywhere. You don't have to go into a building to like connect in like a desktop computer or anything. They're used in sophisticated ways, so it's a vastly bigger opportunity to think about like, okay, how can we use this disruptive technology to our advantage? And that's what we think about inside BESPIN, of like, how do we solve those types of challenges? But I love what George put in the quote is like, yeah, but you can be tracked, right? And the answer is absolutely 100% yes, you can. So how do we eliminate some of those fears? And that's just one of the fears, location tracking, probably the biggest one, right? That's why it's top left. But like, how do you eliminate some of those fears for mobile in operations? And that's what we have to think about. And that's like such a cool problem to try to solve inside of our software factory. So all these fears, I'm just going to kind of walk you through this of like how we are trying to implement mitigations around those fears. So the first one is that pipeline. All down here is these pre-vetted mobile applications. You want to make sure your app's not leaking, like your lat long or geofencing, because a lot of like advertising applications do that, right? That's why when you walk by Baskin Robbins and the next thing you see is like a push notification to get ice cream or something like that. That's because of that leaking your lat long on some of the app that might be running in the background. So you got to like be very cognizant of that. So our pipeline checks for all of that. These aren't just like run-of-the-mill commercial apps. We are very strict on like what these apps are allowed to do. And since we control the ability to push those applications directly into the app store ourselves, we have a little bit more flexibility on like the things that we're going to allow these applications to do. So that's going to like really eliminate a lot of the fears at the application layer, to make sure that you can trust the apps on the network or on these devices. But then what about the data layer, right? Like you have all this data that you're collecting, like maybe it's a full motion video, maybe it's an acoustic model. or whatever, maybe it's just a bunch of chats, in a chat app or something like that, that would be very powerful information if we could then use it to get it into the hands of the enterprise to do smart things with it. And so this Arrakis application answers, hey, I have data, where should I put it? And the answer should be, you should put it into Arrakis. It's going to clean the data, because there's always that challenge with, being able to introduce models and AI is like you're doing a lot of data wrangling in the back end. This application does a little bit of cleanliness when you're extracting it and loading it into this AWS server here. And that's going to allow you to, this is where our AI team comes into play. We work a lot with Special Operations Forces AI team to then take this information that's coming off of Arrakis and doing that data fusion, figuring out, hey, what data that we have that's coming off of these devices could we fuse together? Which can we make a model for this data that we can just push onto the device? It's a kind of a fun problem to solve, of like how much battery life is going to be eaten up with doing data processing at the edge and all of those types of things. I see a question here. You mentioned deploying some applications on public app stores. Are there any other public supported sources you use, like programming languages, IDEs, and compilers? Yeah, absolutely. So that the pipeline, that we're using is, we all kind of like from it. We use IntelliJ to kind of like do our IDEs. We're starting to get into GitLab Duo as well to kind of help with, using that like AI technology for code assist. Then like programming languages, we use all the common programming languages that are out there, like Flutter, React, Swift, Java, all of those types of things. Oh yeah, so sorry, yeah, I am an active reservist. I'm a lieutenant colonel in the reserves. The question was like, are you currently active? I'm a government civilian as my day job, but I do reservist as well. So the answer is yes to both type of thing. And I think and then, open source technologies as well, right? Like one of the cool things that we use, like you could Google ditto.live. We use that application a lot to help us stand up those mesh networks. It's open source, big fan of it. It's kind of cool if you want to like, play around with mesh networks and things like that. But all of that, gets vetted and approved for use through that pipeline. We're very strict about like cybersecurity. Moving to the next thing. So what that Arrakis capability does is like eliminate the fear that like, yeah, that's great, but the data on your network on the device is never going to make it into my network. We can do that now, or we have this approved application to move those large scale data files like full motion videos, pictures, anything that like you would typically send as like your personal mission. Think about like, what about the military mission? They might need that type of information for just looking at it from a different angle, if you get what I'm saying. Then you go into, well, that's great, but we don't always have full up bandwidth, inside of the battlefield or, in austere locations or anything like that. How am I still going to be able to share, show, and edit data offline? So that's that ditto.live thing. That's the Ditto software development kit that we use. That's going to help with disconnected ops to be able to establish a Bluetooth mesh network or transec agnostic. If your network has 5G, you're going to use 5G, and if your network has a Mod 8 radio, which is just a radio that has like internet kind of baked into it, that can be part of this mesh network. And we're doing TLS encryption, actually going up to AES 256 for this encryption now. So all of those transec paths that are on Bluetooth, which is typically pretty vulnerable, is treated like a transec path of like a Wi-Fi using AES 256 encryption for those node-to-node types of conversations, and really helping you establish a secure mesh network and be able to share, show, and edit data even when you're offline. And that's the beauty. You gotta like think differently. Mobile's a little bit of a different beast. You gotta build, offline architecture first. Like mobile native apps is what we call them. So, we really make sure that like, some apps on your phone aren't mobile native, and that's why you can't really do much with them if you don't have internet connectivity. But the ones that you can still kind of play with and still kind of store some information, maybe even go to the next level of being able to store and forward until you have connectivity. That's what this Ditto SDK allows us to do. So we can still have mission resilience when we're outside of, just good bandwidth type of thing. And that's going to help with this fear of like, I'm not going to be able to use mobile, inside of like disconnected ops. Now the newer Apple devices can live. Yes, I love that. So if you ever see like SOS, like you don't have bars, but you see SOS on your phone, what that really is like it's a software-defined sat phone now on your Apple device, and you can use that SOS to be able to call 911 or anything like that. And they just rolled it out that like you are now going to be able to do sending texts over that SOS chat thing as well. There are so many women who like to clear step-by-step process, how to apply for OTS when they have, oh yeah, if you have coworkers. Oh, absolutely. For we can, I will please take the note. Like as a former Air Force officer, as a current Air Force officer in the reserves, I know the whole OTS and step-by-step process for how to get to become an officer in the Air Force pretty well. So I'll make sure to send some follow-up information on that. Yeah, and it's not just iPhone 15 that's doing that. Like the modern Google and Samsung devices are also getting into that SOS mode as well. But let's kind of talk geolocation obfuscation, being able to do managed attribution, hiding in the noise, really encrypting the traffic if you have connectivity for long haul back into the cloud or anything like that. That's where we also have to be aware of, right? So, getting a little nerdy here, but your IMEI and your eSIM on your device basically is like an identifier of like, this is Matt. It's basically like your IP address for your computer that's what it is for your device. So you want to be able to kind of obfuscate and hide in the noise there. So we have techniques to kind of do that in a smart way, to do eSIM and IMEI rotation on the devices, so you can makes it super difficult if every 15 minutes a new device pops up on the network to kind of identify, even though with us it's the same device through the scatter technology, like doing all of those things to really obfuscate from a geolocation perspective. But then like, what if they do hack you, right? Like inside that world, they know who you are or whatever. You don't want them to be able to trace the breadcrumbs to where you're trying to push your information on, because then they can do man-in-the-middle attacks on you. And you don't want, someone that knows where that, location's going and trace the breadcrumbs back to you either. And so that's what this whole technology that we're working with Scatter is like, takes your device information, breaks it up in 5 different comms paths. You can then obfuscate that traffic so it looks like just regular YouTube streaming traffic or anything like that. It's going to hit a relay node anywhere in the world. These are globally defined relay nodes that we can set up. Then it's going to hit a head node, ideally like inside of a secure behind a firewall type of instance, in our case AWS, decrypts all of that information and really allows really secure transec over untrusted networks. So that's what our scatter capability can do. And it gives the warfighter the confidence that they can use their device without being spotted. Because I don't think I have it in this presentation, but back in 2021, the Ukrainian forces did that to the Russian forces, right? They were able to track using ad tech actually. So like the advertising tech of leaking lat long on like, I think like a dating app or something like that. They were able to then, co-locate that information to, basically a combat outpost for the Russian troops, called in an airstrike, killed 89 troops. So the last thing we want on the battlefield is for that story to happen to our U.S. troops. So that's why we take managed attribution is what we call it. So you want to be able to manage how you attribute onto the networks of where you're at, because maybe there are sometimes you want to do that. We take that extremely serious inside of BESPIN to make sure that we're, lives are on the line of like being able to trust that and finding ways to do this. So that's what scatter is. So hearing this, like curious, what has been the biggest hurdle in finding team members in the early stages of your company? So we're an Air Force organization, not company, but I was a COO of a company for 3 years. So I'm going to answer this question in two ways. One is on the Air Force side, since the vast majority of our unit is enlisted airmen, we don't they come straight out of tech school, straight out of boot camp, and they give them to us. It's our job to train them and upskill them, and that's where the civilians come in. We're looking for civilians that could come in and be those player coaches, and it's conversations like these to get people excited about the mission and trying to figure out how to do all of these things, and hopefully like get you excited about this mobile mission that we're really doing. And then on the company side, right? Like, and this is just like Matt Nelson's opinion here, but branding really, really matters, right? Like being able to be exposed on LinkedIn of your opinions and your own personal brand, and people understanding who you are and what you stand for and what like gets your passions and motivations, that is huge. When I was a CEO of a company, I would be looking at LinkedIn, finding folks that I thought were thought leaders and pushing them out. And like anyone can be a thought leader now in this stage with social media. And like we do a ton of LinkedIn, marketing for BESPIN, even though we're an organization, because we want to bring in those thought leaders. So yeah, absolutely. Those are the hurdles that there are, for us is the hiring timeline is tough, right? Like when I was the COO of Rise 8, and then by the time I said yes, I'm interested in becoming your CTO of BESPIN, I said yes, and then 9 months later I got hired. So that is a tough challenge, but luckily for students like yourself, there are really cool programs like the PAC program, which is like an internship that automatically drives you into the front door of what the civilian world is. I'm not an expert in that. That's why I think we had Maxie on the call. I don't know if you want to just jump in here real quick. I got like 3 more slides, so I think we have time if you want to jump in on that one.
I was going to say, I'm not able to add anything to the chat. I don't think I have access since I was the last minute add-on, but I'd be happy to provide a link that talks more about the PAC program as well as the PSIPs, our internship program. So yeah, I'd be more than happy to provide a link so you guys can look into that. And let me know if you have any questions.
All right, cool. So just kind of getting back into this, fears presentation that I'm trying to walk you through here is we talked about cryptography, managed attribution, insecure comms. That's what the scatter piece does. But then the last 2 components of our overall support suite is you got to be able to trust the device. And with that is we have this, it's called a mobile device manager, but it's really just the back end is IBM MAS 360. I don't even know what MAS 360 stands for, but it's a mobile device management tool that does, if you lose your phone, it's remote wipe and lock, making sure you have the latest iOS version or operating system update, like do device backup so you don't lose all your data. All of those things that you would want to make sure you have control of on these devices. That's what Boxcar does for us. And then Mobile Connect is the last component that we have. So if you become a government civilian, you'll get a CAT card, which is like actually a super powerful thing. If you think about like a lot of these other coalition partners like the Philippines and other second world type of partners that we work with. Their militaries don't have this cat card that's connected to a global access list on a website where you can basically have access to everybody, inside the DoD at your fingertips. And it does amazing credentialing, and it really allows us to do role-based access control in a smart way. So what Mobile Connect does is it takes because your cat card has a little chip in it. I'm not a PKI person, like basically just like a little credential. And you can load those credentials from your physical card onto your device through Mobile Connect. And then, it connects your ability to log into your applications that we're working with. Because if you do lose your phone and they somehow open your phone, they're still going to need your biometrics or your 16-character PIN through Mobile Connect to access any of the apps. So really trying to establish, additional layers of security in the onion. That's what Mobile Connect does. So essentially, our suite that we're building with inside BESPIN is trying to eliminate a lot of those, fears around mobile. Even like I mentioned, like only 10% of the warfighters have the ability to do their mission on a mobile device. My goal and vision in life is like it should be 100%. We should have everyone be able to do these things because when we roll into the next fight, we're going to need to have that asymmetrical advantage on the battlefield. And modern telecommunications is all leaning towards this no longer decentralized hub and spoke model, but a true disparate type of model with all these devices inside of a mesh, self-healing types of networks. So that's what we want to roll out to. So if you look at the future of where we're trying to take the DoD is, hey, our mobile operations are enabling agile combat employment, which is a concept that says like you can be agile and roll into an austere location within 24 hours and be up and running. It's because how we're going to do it is like we want to have hundreds of apps that really radically change the warfighter's daily habits around mobile. All the data that's flowing across the networks. We really want to that's going to enable us to no longer be tethered to our laptops and being able to hook into a NIPR or a SIPR line to that's classified, unclassified lines to be able to conduct your mission. We want every DoD member to have a mobile device, and this is a stretch goal, right? Like there's 600,000 Air Force members when you talk active duty civilians and reservists. But if they all had this, that we could create a new distributed network and really change the game. We might not get there, but that's the dream at least. And then the being able to do that adaptive basing and be able to support data, no longer having to go inside of a building to access data, which is dramatically going to increase our freedom of movement. And that's really where the whole AI processing at the edge conversation comes into play. So I believe that's it for me. So I just want to say thank you. I hope you enjoyed the talk. I'll hand it back over to Juwan for what's next here.
Yeah, we have a little bit of time for Q&A if there's, I know you were answering a ton during your presentation, but if there's any extra questions that you guys have in regards to Matt or to Maxie, feel free to post right now. Actually, while we're talking about this, I did have some questions pop in my mind as we were going through this presentation. One of the things that stuck out to me when you were talking about some of the tech stack in regards to the enterprise grade license for the self-signature to be able to put on app stores, you don't have to go through the normal Apple process. I know typically when it comes to developing Apple software or any Apple apps, whether it's through iOS, iPad OS, or Mac OS, you typically have to compile that through Xcode. Are you still beholden to that to some extent because Xcode is still needed, or is that more of a multi-platform solution now for you guys?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, now there's this whole Xcode in the cloud thing, but it's super expensive. And so we still have to you have to compile your code via Xcode. So what we did we partnered with a data center at Offutt Air Force Base. I'm trying to find this one slide that's a decent visual for this. But when you're compiling your code here at the end, what we have done is we actually stacked, I think, I don't know, maybe 8 iPad minis inside of this data center, put Xcode on them, and we automatically push our binaries over to that Xcode variant inside of that data center that's at Offutt Air Force Base in a protected area to compile the code. So we built our own mini little Xcode data center down there in Nebraska to meet that requirement. So yes, we still have to meet that requirement, but it's our own Xcode world type of thing, I guess you could say.
That's cool. I've actually heard of those Mac Mini farms. I've watched some videos on those, so it's really cool to see the Air Force utilizing that for their needs. There's actually one question that just popped in. I hope I'm pronouncing this right. Hamant Balan. Is product management a career field that recent graduates can pursue at BESPIN or other DoD orgs?
Yes, absolutely. So product management, we follow the whole balanced team approach. So most of our teams have a full-time product manager on them, a full-time UI UX engineer on them, or software designer on them, and then 4 to 6 engineers depending on the complexity of the app. And that's the full team. So yes, product management is definitely a career field, and it's a budding career field. It just really, I am relatively new to the government civilian world, so I don't know like all the acronyms that Maxie knows, but there's this whole defense civilian framework, and product management is actually made it into that framework as a shred out of what I am, which is a 2210, which is IT operations career billet, but there's shred outs for software developers in there, product management, even design. So yeah, great question.
Awesome. We're pushing time a bit, so we have time for one more question before we start to wrap this up. But last one here from Fad McNeely. Is there a particular OS that is being used, i.e. Windows, iOS, etc., or are you using a Linux-based OS or something different?
Yeah, so we don't break iOS or anything like that to build like a military version of that. So we're using iOS and as our primary, because we do the vast majority of the apps that we build are Apple. So we primarily just vanilla iOS and build on top of that, because the level of complexity to kind of like fork iOS was just too much, for us to kind of take on.
Awesome. So, one second. I'm trying to bring back up our slide deck here. Jesse already shared some links in the chat, but if anybody is well, first, before I get into that, I want to thank Matt for speaking for us here. It was a really great talk, especially going in depth on what those software factories are and a lot of the, life cycle of building those apps, especially within the government field and some of the protections that need to take place. So again, thank you so much for giving that talk. In relation to AI futures, if you're interested in pursuing a career in the DoD, or if you have more questions that you want to give to any of us, there's 2 links that are currently in chat to 2 people that are currently on the team that do student informational sessions. If you have more questions, feel free to click on those links. I should have the PowerPoint up here soon. That should have the QR codes if you want to scan those as well. But yeah, thanks again, Matt. Thanks for everybody that showed up here. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day and a great weekend.
All right. Thank you so much. I'm out here.